Welcome to the show, IB Nation Sports Talk, and it is Midweek Mailbag Day. He's Vince DeDario. I'm Sean Stiers. How are you today, Vince?
I'm fantastic. We got 1 day of school left, Sean Stiers.
Sweet.
1 day of school left.
I bet you're fantastic.
Feeling pretty good right about now. Well, feeling pretty darn good.
I know you're teaching summer school. Do you have any other, as an administrator type, do you have any other summer duties that you have to take care of?
So I, not to go too into the weeds here, I have a contract plus 5 is what it's called. So I have to work 5 extra days, 3 at the beginning of the year, 2 at the end of the year. So technically I'm not done until next Wednesday.
Okay.
But, you know,
no kids.
I'll go to school all day without kids.
I was going to say no kids to get in trouble, though, in the meantime. So.
Exactly. It's like, it's like a wrap up, paperwork, that kind of fun stuff. No big deal. So I got a few more days left, but the kids are all done tomorrow, and that's glorious.
Yes. I've got Thursdays are going to start looking different here on the old IB channel. Brian and I are going to have an afternoon show. I have no idea what we're talking about tomorrow afternoon, but we'll be talking about something. Then I've got two guests lined up for tomorrow. So for tomorrow night's show at 6 o'clock.
That escalated quickly, as they would say, because we were spitballing some ideas yesterday, and all of a sudden you got 2 guests. I'm impressed.
I decided there's one, and I'll save it as a surprise for tomorrow. One, we've got another opponent beat writer that I'll be talking to. The other one is kind of he's a little bit different kind of guest, but I think it's going to be fun, like especially for guys in our age demographic, like the 40 plus, probably. I don't know where exactly the cutoff is, but we're going to have some fun with the second guest tomorrow. There's it's tied into Notre Dame football and definitely tied into sports, but it's a little bit different, a little off the beaten path. It's a good summer guest, I think you'd say, but one that I think that a lot of people will still find very interesting. So, little tease there for tomorrow's show.
I feel teased. I feel like I've been teased appropriately.
I'm glad you feel teased. All right. Well, we've got a couple questions in here, 2 or 3 lined up. Fire your questions off, and we will get to them, of course, on today's show. And in the meantime, smash that old like button and subscribe, rate, and review, and all that good stuff. I'm thrown off. Usually when you have one of these holiday weeks, it feels like the day you're on is like the day, previous. I've felt like I should be ahead a day. Like it's felt like Thursday all day today instead of Wednesday. So
I'm all over the map because we, like you said, we had Monday off because it was Memorial Day, and then the kids' last day is tomorrow. So it feels like it's going to be a Friday. I'm all over the place, man. I can't tell one day from the next. And I took a half day yesterday to do the show with Brian. This whole week has just been nutty and
weird week. Yep.
And just to top it all off, Sean Stiers, tomorrow, this is a blast from your past, is the first day of summer camps at Notre Dame.
Oh, wow.
So
I've been meaning to ask you if you're still doing that. So you're still running the old camp. This is year what? You've been doing 15, this for a while now.
15
years.
Now, 2 of those years were canceled because of a global pandemic. But I would have done it. I would have done it. So this would have been the 15th summer. I guess 13th technically, but yeah.
Stretches 15. Back 15 years. 15
Crazy,
years since started it anyway. Yeah.
Yep.
My goodness. Remember some of that crew from back in the day.
Well, one of the crew who was a high school kid when we first started became my assistant and now has a husband and 2 kids. So that's how long it's been since I've been doing this.
Man.
So
way back.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go to Rob's question. Let's start with this.
Oh, this is a good one, though.
Part 1. With the potential of an increased downfield attack, do you think it's possible to get more rushing yards with less attempts? Part 2. Keeping the defense honest and not stacking the box like they did last year. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Rob. It's a good one, I think.
No, it's a really good question. And it's an X's and O's question, which is always fun. And I would say it's not the potential of an increased downfield attack. There will be a downfield attack. There's no doubt about it. If you watch any of the the blue gold game practice, you've watched any tape of Sam Hartman and what he does, or if you're on the message board and you looked at Brian's 3-part series of downfield throws by Sam Hartman, there's going to be an increased downfield attack, no doubt about it, right? So could they get more rushing yards with less attempts? I think it's definitely possible because Notre Dame over the past few years with Ian Book at the helm, even last year and the year before, I would say every year that since Ian, so 2018, 2019, 2020, then you had Jack Cohn in 2021, so maybe a little bit less, but definitely last year in 2022 with Drew Pine, teams are stacking the box against Notre Dame because they know that they can run, and that's what they have to stop, right? And they were still able to have good numbers in the running game for the most part overall, right? Well, when you have somebody that can spread the ball around and not only just pushing the ball down the field, we're also talking about using the field, the width of the field as well, all 53 1/3 yards wide, because I think that's also going to occur, right? They have to loosen the box. And if they loosen the box, that obviously opens up things in the run game. So, long story short, yes, I do think that they could have more rushing yards with less attempts. I absolutely do think that because I don't think it's going to be the same old run, pass, punt situation that the offense has been, in the last year or two. I think it's going to be much more balanced. I think they're going to be throwing the ball on first down. I think they're going to be running the ball when they want to run the ball. I think it's going to be a very effective offense, and I think they're going to gash some people on the ground. There's no doubt about that. But Sam Hartman's going to get his numbers too.
Yes, definitely. And I saw this question in the queue, and Vince logged in, and I was sitting here and I was like scribbling stuff down, and it was like I was cramming for the test, right before the class was about to begin and they were about to start handing out the test. Do they even hand out tests anymore? I don't know. But I went and what I was doing, I was comparing it to what USC did last year. Long story short, I agree with what Vince is saying. I think at the very least, you're going to have a higher yards per attempt average this year. You're going to, like last year, Notre Dame only averaged 4.6 yards per carry, which is solid but not great. USC averaged 5.1 per carry. They had 60 fewer attempts than Notre Dame, but they also threw for 335 yards per game, whereas Notre Dame only averaged 207 passing yards per game. So I think that Notre Dame is minimal, going to be much closer, right around at 300 passing yards per game. But because of the, and USC didn't have like a legitimate, serious rushing attack either. Part of their rushing attack was still Caleb Williams and his ability. And they had okay running backs, pretty good offensive line, as we saw, a much improved offensive line, as we saw. But Notre Dame's combination of what they have in the backfield and the offensive line and that downfield attack that Vince was just detailing there, even though USC might have the potential number 1 overall draft pick quarterback next year, I think Notre Dame's combination of all three things is going to be better. And so while they might not necessarily end up with a lot more rushing yards per game, they are going to have a lot more passing yards per game. And I think the rushing efficiency at the very least is going to be better with better yards per attempt. You're going to have easier third downs to convert, all those different kind of things.
Yeah,
I think we're a little bit off, but again, I think
same idea.
I think the rushing efficiency at the very least is going to be better. You don't necessarily have to have a whole lot more rushing yards. Like Notre Dame only averaged 18 more rushing yards per game than USC last year. So even if you're the same rushing yards, but your passing yards increases by almost 100 per game, and the yards per attempt goes up, over that 5, which I think it will. I think that they'll rush for over 5 yards per carry this season, and a lot of it's going to be attributable to what you were talking about, is the loosened up boxes. They're not going to be able to stack boxes and all that kind of stuff because of the threat of the passing game that's going to be there.
Well, and I think the passing game is going to be, like, people are underselling the passing game. So, like Matt D says, I would love to see a Notre Dame quarterback throw for over 3,000 yards that would attract future QB recruits. That's averaging 230 yards a game.
Yeah.
Sam Hartman's going to go well over 3,000 yards.
He's going to be between 3,500 and 4,000.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's not even having a prolific passing season, to be honest with you, right? I mean, like I said, 13 games. You assume Notre Dame's going to win more than 6 games, so they're going to get a bowl game, right? And if Sam Hartman is healthy, so that's 13 games. 3,000 divided by 13 is 230. He's going to have well over that. I would not be surprised if he averaged over 300 yards a game, right? And if it's 300 yards a game, it's pretty simple math,
and
right?
Again,
300 times 13, 3,900 yards.
Using Caleb Williams as a gauge, he threw for a little over 4,500 yards last year. That's 324 per game. So again, like if you drop the 24 off and you only go to 300, that's 3,600 yards right there.
Right.
If you're averaging 300 yards per game, which I think is, to me,
incredibly doable. I mean,
to me, that's the floor.
Yes. I completely agree.
The only thing that'll knock that off is if they have big leads and they are just running the ball all the time in the fourth quarter, which could happen a lot because of some of the teams that they're going to play.
Well, and that's the thing. So, we don't know Marcus Freeman and Jared Parker as a combo, right? Offensive combo, and what it's going to look like if there's a blowout scenario. In the past, they didn't take the starter out of the game. They just didn't. With Brian Kelly, they didn't take the starter out of the game. And we complained about that all the time. The backup would never get any kind of meaningful reps. If he did come in to be like for one series, and it would be handing the ball off all the time, right? And what is that going to look like with Marcus Freeman? Is he going to, if it's a blowout against Tennessee State, if they're up by 35, 40 points or whatever, in the first half, you give the offense like another drive, let them go down and score, and then you start cycling in the 2s and the 3s or whatever, right? As an example. Or are you going to keep them in the entire time and then just not do anything with the football? Just hand it off, run between the tackles with your starter. You know what I mean? So, what is that going to look like? So does that mean that Sam Hartman's not going to get a lot of second half reps? So maybe that hurts his numbers. I'm very curious, especially in the first 3 games of the season, to see how they manage the personnel and how long the starters are on the field on both sides of the ball, but specifically the offense and the quarterback. I mean, personally, I would love to see Sam Hartman take a seat at that point, and then you put in Steve Angeli if he's your number 2 with the ones. Give him a couple series with the ones running the offense, as opposed to just turning around and doing like what you and I could do and just hand the ball off.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's, getting those big leads gives you the benefit of being able to get some of those reserves in there and get them some time.
Right.
And they were able to do that a couple of times last year. You want to see them do it a whole lot more, especially with where you are with the quarterback situation right now. I think you need to get, Angeli, not necessarily meaningful reps, but you need to get him some competitive reps that aren't just, as you just said, just handing the ball off. Still let him run the offense for a series or 2 if you get those opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. No question.
Jason wants to know how many fewer plays per game to expect with the new clock rules. I think it is, what I saw was it's like between 10 and 15 plays per game, with the new.
Per team? Wow, that's a lot.
Total.
Oh, total. Okay. That would make sense. 7, 8 plays a team.
Now, obviously, some of that depends on what kind of offense you run.
Sure.
And, those kind of things. but it's not gonna.
I don't think it's
not
going
to drastically alter it. It's just gonna. I think game flow is just going to improve. You're not going to have so many clock stoppages and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know that it's going to be super noticeable. I still think Notre Dame's going to score a ton of points, and I don't think people are going to be like, "Oh, this game is just dragging," because I think it's going to be fun to watch, to be honest. So I don't know that it's going to be all that noticeable. What's going to be noticeable on our end is, wow, the game's already over from a time standpoint. Like, we're used to games lasting X amount of time, and I think it's obviously going to be shortened, and I think we're going to notice that, but between the whistles, I don't know that we're going to notice it as much.
Yes. Concur. Tommy, over under 500 passing yards for backup quarterbacks in non-injury playing time.
This is a really good question. I'm not a stat guy like Brian. Like, I can't come up with the stats as quickly as he can, but I would be shocked if Notre Dame has ever had 500 yards passing from a true backup the entire game. Or the entire season. Because
Buckner threw for 652 last year, and obviously he was a starter in 3 games.
The third game, or the final game, he had a bunch.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So sorry, my eyes are itching. There's just all kinds of junk in the air right now.
There is.
I'm going under.
I think under too.
I think maybe a couple hundred at the most.
Right.
I don't think that it's. I don't think that they're going to be throwing that much, which as he says, in non-injury playing time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It'll be, like I said, I want to see Steve Angeli running the offense, but I still don't think they're going to like push the ball down the field and do, things that are going to allow his numbers to creep up. Now, if there's like a game where Sam Hartman can't go, and it happens to be, I don't know, I can't even think of a game, Duke, for example, and, he goes out there and he throws for 250 yards. Well, he's going to get a lot closer to 500 real quick, right? And then you add in the rest of the games. But outside of him actually starting a game, I just don't. I'm going to take the under on this one as well.
Yeah. Ian wants to know, what teams can realistically compete for a title this year? What does Notre Dame need to do to be able to solidly be in that group if we aren't already?
Well, I mean, you take your big ones, right? So Georgia, you got to say Alabama until they're not, right? Even though their quarterback position is in flux. Okay, so you have to say those two. Ohio State, until I see that their quarterback stinks, that they're in the mix, right? So Michigan. This is realistic, right? So Michigan is one because their schedule is incredibly soft. So they've got a chance because they're in a power conference. And the other thing you have to remember, too, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, they all have big games on their schedule that could make or break their season or make or break the opposition's season, right? So you got to put USC in that category. Well, they play Notre Dame, right? You put Ohio State in that category. They play Michigan. They play Notre Dame, right? I think Clemson is in the discussion because until they're not, I think they have to be there, okay? So, but they play Notre Dame. So, I mean, again, there's a lot of teams that I guess you could put Washington in there. I know they're kind of a dark horse favorite.
I don't think maybe one of those Pac-12 teams has the ability to run the table, but they're all playing each other this year. USC, Washington, Oregon, UCLA, and Utah. Those are the 5 best teams, should be the 5 best teams in the Pac-12. And they're all playing each other. Like, I was looking at the schedules today, and I don't see one of those teams being able to run the table. I don't think one of those teams is that much better.
And that's going to hurt
each of those teams. Yeah,
they're going to knock each other off, right? I mean,
exactly. And then you throw in the fact that, USC, as you said, is playing Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I have a hard time seeing USC being a playoff team at the end of the season, unless they really take another big.
They're going to have to run the table in the Pac-12. Yeah. They're going to have to, because
absolutely
they can overcome a loss to Notre Dame because it's in the middle of the season. Okay, but they've got to run the table the rest of the way. They got to be an 11-1 team, and they have to be the Pac-12 champion, right? So they would be a 12-1 team. A 12-1 USC team is getting in the playoff. I mean, let's be realistic about that, right? Even if that, wherever that loss happens to come, whether it's Notre Dame, whether it's Utah, whatever, a 12-1 USC team, I think gets in. I do, because I don't think everybody else is going to be 12-1.
But I also don't see them losing just one game. That's
fair,
because they play. There's actually a rapid fire question, so maybe I'll kind of save it for that. We're talking about playoff teams, but because of USC's schedule, it is not conducive to ending up in the college football playoff. I don't think, because of who they have to play. And I'm not saying like Washington, Oregon, Utah, USC are all heavy hitters, but I think that they're all close enough.
Sure.
That I don't think that, and then you throw UCLA in there as well, just because UCLA was such a good running team, a physical running team, which is something that USC last year had trouble with the exception of Notre Dame for whatever reason. But, we talked about that with RJ Abadia last week. They went out and they got Bear Alexander from Georgia, but they've got big questions at linebacker that they've got to address. And they're going to play basically all those teams with the exception of Washington, Oregon, Utah, UCLA. They're going to run the football at you. And I don't know that because of and so is Notre Dame for that matter. And because of the way USC's schedule sets up, I don't see them being able to only lose one, like only have one loss at the end of it all. If they are able to do that, then great for them. But they're also going to have to play a Pac-12 championship game again after that. So, but and again, like, because all 5 of those teams are playing each other, I just don't see one team being able to escape out of that with just one loss.
Oh, I think that's fair. And I think that, I don't see 2 Big Ten teams getting in, barring something crazy happening, right? So it's either going to be Michigan or Ohio State. I would say that. Do Georgia and Alabama both get in? I still have a lot of question marks about Alabama's quarterback position. Now, can they overcome that with the talent that's around them? Sure. But that's a big question mark right now. I need to see some games with whoever they decide to put under center or behind center, I guess, nowadays. I need to see it from Alabama to see, are they a national championship caliber team? Until they're not, I think you have to bring them up, though, right? I mean, it's going to be interesting. I think Notre Dame is in that mix. They're a top 10 team, going into the season, I think legitimately. And like I've said before, they've got 3 marquee games on their schedule to either make it or break it. I mean, the national championship discussion is 100% in Notre Dame's hands, 100%. And they hold the path to other teams in their hands as well, since they play Ohio State. You know what I mean? They play Ohio State, USC, and Clemson. Like, I think they pretty firmly hold the future of all 3 of those teams for 23 this year. So
absolutely.
So Notre Dame's in that discussion. Absolutely. And there's one more I want to throw in because it's kind of goes along with what we're talking about. Matt D says, if Notre Dame and Ohio State are 11-1, would USC jump either of those teams to get in? Now, Matt, what you didn't tell us. Oh,
who's winning which game?
Here we go.
That's
so he
question.
Followed it up. Here we go. Would a 12-1 USC team get in over a 12-1 Ohio State and an 11-1 Notre Dame? Depends on what those losses are and who they were to, right? So
yeah, I mean, if Notre Dame beats USC and that's the loss, then that throws a big wrench into things.
Sure. And where's that Notre Dame loss? Did they lose to Ohio State or did they lose to USC? Like, who did Notre Dame lose to Clemson?
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So that's a big one. I would have to know who they lost to because I think that comes into play. Notre Dame's going to get knocked, obviously, because they don't have a conference championship game. I get that. But I think they're at the end of the day, their strength of schedule is going to be better than both Ohio State and USC.
Right.
So
and this to all the detractors is like, what we're talking about here. You've got Notre Dame playing 3 conference front runners this year in 3 different Power 5 conferences, Clemson, USC, and Ohio State. So like you talk about a cross section of a schedule, that you can, that you can compare resumes with, sort of like for people who like to knock Notre Dame's independence and they don't play in a conference championship game. I mean, they're playing potentially 3 teams that could end up being conference champions.
And this is interesting because let's say Notre Dame loses to Clemson. So that means the losses for Ohio State and USC are Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I can't put them in over Notre Dame. They both lost to Notre Dame.
Right.
In that scenario,
and the question is going to be
in.
how close the Clemson game is.
Sure.
And then you also have
on the road. That
right.
one's on the road, right? So
and they're all sitting there with one loss. So who else has other losses? That's going to be,
of course.
If
we're just talking about
part of it,
those three teams.
But if it's those three teams for one spot, like say to get the number 4 spot, then I think Notre Dame probably gets it.
Absolutely. And I don't think there's any discussion, to be honest with you. Their losses are Notre Dame's wins. Yeah. I mean, if you see, the discussion comes in when you don't have head-to-head matchups, right?
Right.
And so in this particular scenario, they have head-to-head. Notre Dame beat both of them. They get in. End of discussion.
But committee has shown just 2 years ago that a head-to-head means nothing, because remember when Michigan State beat Michigan and Michigan was ranked ahead of Michigan State.
That's true.
Anyway, and there was all the outrage until Michigan State ended up losing after that and got their doors blown off, if I remember right. But still, the committee has shown that, like, they think that based on what they're seeing, Team X is better than Team Y, regardless of head-to-head, they'll go with that.
I still feel like at the end of the day, with those records, that Notre Dame gets in above both.
I would think so. Yeah. But the other thing to remember is both of those games, one game is going to be in September, the other is going to be in October. The Clemson game would be in November.
More recent.
So there's enough distance between the September and October by the time the end of the season rolls around that, again, the committee could disregard that. But I mean, if we're just going, like, if those are the only losses for each of those teams, then Notre Dame should be the one that comes out on top in that scenario.
Yeah, and again, it also matters, who the other teams are from the SEC, like what are their records. But I can tell you right now, I will take an 11-1 Notre Dame team and I will ride them into the playoff and feel very confident about it. Depending on, where the loss was, how much was it by, all those different things. I'll take a 1-loss Notre Dame team, because I think that they've got a great shot of getting into the playoff. Great shot of getting into the playoff.
Yeah, me too.
That means they beat 2 out of the 3 of the big names on their schedule, and those would be huge wins.
I mean, really, it's only going to be an SEC team that's going to have a chance to have a resume like that. To have those 2 kind of quality wins.
Right.
But then again, it's going to come down to, can USC hold its own at the end of the schedule? Because I'll tell you what the end of the schedule looks like when we get to that rapid fire question. I don't know if you've looked at it, but
I've looked at it.
It's not going to be easy for USC at the end of the season.
No, it's not. And I just, honestly, I guess if all things considered, I think of those 3 teams, Ohio State, USC, Clemson, I feel like Clemson's the 3rd best. So then I guess that would then bring into the conversation, is Notre Dame's loss worse than the other losses? Right. So there's a lot of conversation, I think, around that, but I still like Notre Dame's chances in that scenario.
Me too. Chris, thank you for the super chat. What do you see happening at quarterback in 2024?
I see a competition between the 3 guys that are on the roster, and they're going to get somebody in the transfer portal. What they do in the transfer portal, I think, has a lot to do with how Kenny Minchie and Steve Angeli operate during the season this year.
How they develop,
and we're not going to know, because we're not there, right? We're going to have our sources and we're going to talk to people and we're going to do all of that. But how confident is this staff in those 2 plus CJ Carr? Does he go out and just have, one of the best senior seasons in high school and think that maybe he can come in and compete as a true freshman? Maybe. So what kind of transfer is coming in? Are you getting a transfer like a Sam Hartman? Or are you getting a transfer, that's going to come in and, hey, we're going to give you an opportunity to compete, but somebody that's not like an automatic like a Sam Hartman was? You know what I mean? I think you're going to learn a lot about how the staff sees the roster by who they get in the transfer portal. Mark my words, they're getting somebody in the transfer portal. That's happening. It just depends on what caliber of guy that they go get.
Because if they don't, then you've got the same situation you had last season, where you've got 2 inexperienced quarterbacks coming into the season.
Right.
And
you have to go get somebody. And as good as CJ Carr is, and I do think he's going to be, a really good quarterback at Notre Dame, you can't pin all your hopes and dreams on a true freshman. Like, that's dangerous. That's very dangerous, because what if he's just not as good mentally, like right off the bat? That doesn't mean he's not going to be great down the road, but is he going to be ready to be the quarterback in 24? Like, you're taking a big chance on that.
At some point, though, like the cycle, because, and I agree, it's most likely they're going to go get a transfer portal quarterback again next year. But at some point, you're probably going to have to start someone who's inexperienced, right? And
for sure,
because the risk you take by bringing in another transfer is what just happened. 2 quarterbacks transferred. You had 2 quarterbacks start games for you last year. They both transferred because you brought in, a grad transfer quarterback. Now, granted, he's the most experienced grad transfer quarterback you're ever going to get, but you bring one in, you run the risk that someone's going to leave.
Sure.
And then,
I know. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. All right. Here's one from Salty. Caleb Beasley has apparently posted that he will take an official visit to Notre Dame in September. He's a Tennessee commit. Notre Dame does not allow official visits from committed kids. Should they?
I mean, he's already saying he's coming, so they obviously allow it. They approve it before, he's allowed to announce that he's coming. So I don't think that Notre Dame doesn't allow official visits from committed kids. I'm pretty sure that they've had committed kids on campus many times. Now maybe I'm wrong on this, and I'm not the expert in recruiting, but I know they've had kids on campus that are committed elsewhere. Now, whether they were quote unquote official visits or not, I guess I'm not 100% sure on that.
Right.
But I know Caleb Beasley, I think it's Beasley, isn't it?
I think so.
I feel like it's Beasley, but anyway, from what I've heard from Brian, he is like on flip watch. Like he's like the guy that they think has Beasley. He's the guy that they think has the best opportunity to flip from his commitment back over to Notre Dame. So, So Matt D says ND doesn't allow their committed kids to visit other schools, which absolutely is accurate. I don't think it's the other way around.
Right. Another super chat. Thank you very much. Boom. From Shelton Hager 91. Y'all are awesome. So are you. I started listening to IB in 19 right before Vince started. The whole IB team is amazing. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you very much.
That's awesome. Thanks. That means he was on from day one. He's an OG. He was on from day one when Brian was doing solo shows before I got out of my contract.
I didn't even realize he had podcasts 4 years ago.
They were just audio only.
Okay.
And he was doing solo shows. He came over in the middle of the season. It was right after the Georgia game is when he left BGI and started Irish Breakdown. Yeah. And then I had to do all of his work at BGI for the rest of the season. And then as soon as the bowl game was over, I was a free agent and came on over, which was planned all along.
I guess it shouldn't surprise me that it's been that long because we moved here in the summer to the house that I'm in right now in the summer of 2019. So it's like when I start doing when I think about, it's like 2019, that seems longer ago. But then when I think about it, it's like, oh yeah. Like when I start doing the timeline, because then you go season of 2019, pandemic season, all that different stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Things, that's where it all starts blending into.
Pandemic season. Yeah,
I know.
Yes, it does. Got to know the inside of my house way too well.
Yeah. You're taking your chances asking recruiting questions of these two guys, but Vince started, so I'll go ahead and ask it. So I hope that I think I know you have an answer to this. Okay. So Angelo DeDario, when did the Notre Dame admin change their minds on Bronte Johnson, the recent liberal arts major who just transferred in from Penn State with 2 years eligibility remaining? That seemed to be a different type of
I was looking for the rest of that, and I don't
was going to say, is there
see
a
it, but that's
continuation?
okay.
Yeah.
No. So Notre Dame didn't change their minds about Bronte Johnson. He's still in high school. So his grades weren't the best. And I believe Notre Dame basically told him, look, you got to do this, this, and this in order for us to be able to actively recruit you. And he did it. He did those things in school. He got himself back into an academically sufficient place for Notre Dame to actively recruit him. And so they're back to actively recruiting Johnson. And so that's one thing. So that's one question, right? Then he's saying the recent liberal arts major who just transferred from Penn State with 2 years of eligibility remaining.
Devin Ford is who he's talking about.
Correct.
Yeah,
the running back. Yep.
Or she.
I mean, he was in the portal. I don't know exactly what his academic status was or how many, I don't know if he's graduated or I honestly don't know. I think he was at Penn State for 3 years off the top of my head. I'm not 100% sure on that.
And I don't think there's ever been a blanket policy like Notre Dame's not going to take undergraduate transfers. I think it's all case by case, with the biggest question being, how do the academics line up, in comparison to the school that he's trying to transfer into? Because it's the dean of each of those schools, that essentially looks at the transcripts and makes the determination. This person is either online or on course, going in the right direction to get a degree. All their academics line up. We can take them into the school, or they don't. I think that's the biggest thing. There's not like a blanket policy that I think that has been changed, which is what I think the, kind of reference point of the question.
Right. No, absolutely. And I was, let's see. So
and that's something, we don't get to see anyone's transcripts when they're coming in. But the fact that he's coming in means that his academics lined up. I think that that's really all you can read into it.
Yeah, so he enrolled at Penn State in June of 2019. So he had 1920, 2021, 21-22, 22-23.
So that's he's been there for 4 years. So he probably has a degree, and he's going to
probably has a degree.
2 years left.
Yeah. So he took a self-imposed red shirt last year. So that's why he's got 2 years of eligibility remaining, plus or the COVID year, all of those different things, right? So that's why he's got 2 years of eligibility left. My guess, based on that timeline, is that he's got his degree. And that's why it was an easy transfer situation to Notre Dame, because they're going to take grad transfers no matter what. So,
right.
Boom.
Absolutely. Ray says, Brian Kelly was terrible at getting backup quarterbacks meaningful time. How likely is it that Coach Marcus Freeman will get backup quarterbacks playing time and blowout wins? Will he give them quality snaps?
That's the big question, right? We talked about that at the top of the show, Sean. I think that's one of the things we're all going to be taking a look at, because I think there's an opportunity for some blowouts in this season. And what is that going to look like from a backup standpoint? Ray is 100% accurate. Brian Kelly was awful at getting backups anytime, specifically on offense. I think defense, they actually did a pretty decent job. Offensively, they just didn't. And so what does that look like in a Jared Parker, Marcus Freeman regime offensively? I don't know. I hope so. I hope that they are going to get these guys a little bit of quality playing time. But we won't know until we see it.
And I think last year, there were a couple of opportunities, like the UNLV game obviously comes to mind, where there were more opportunities. They could have got some guys in the Boston College game as well. But when you're down to 2 quarterbacks, you're not going to put number 2 in there and put him in those more competitive type situation, quality snaps, because you don't want to risk him getting hurt. That's why you just have, hand the ball off, that kind of stuff. I think it kind of depends on situations. Like we said, for where Notre Dame is right now with what they've got to do for 2024, it's like you're not going to have a package like you had for Tyler Buckner a couple of years ago. But at the same time, I think that there is great benefit in, like what we were talking about earlier, getting the backup or one of the either or, at least Angeli, if not Minchie, depending on what point of the season It's in getting them out there and letting them at least have a series where they can run the whole offense and not just be handing off at the end of games.
I'm hopeful that that's the case. And they know, look, they're well aware of the experience level of the two other guys on the depth chart at quarterback.
Yes.
Right. They're well aware of that. So anytime that they can get those guys an opportunity to get on the field, I have to think that they're going to do that. But we don't know until we know. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to make that happen.
Another super chat. Thank you, Shelton Hager, 91. Best part of the 19 offseason was everyone's concerned about the running back room, rightfully so, but then Kyren Williams happened.
I mean, can anybody debate that Kyren Williams wasn't a great addition to the running back room? I mean, we saw a flash of that in the blue gold game, and I was like, wow, this kid can kind of run. I kind of like the way he does things. And then we didn't see him for a year and a half, basically. And then all of a sudden, he becomes Kyren Williams, right? So
out of nowhere.
That's why we can speculate all we want about all the different parts of the Notre Dame team every year. And something will always happen that's like, oh, a pleasant surprise. This is good stuff. It's the fun. It's the whole fun of this whole thing. So that's why I like covering college athletics, to be honest with you, as opposed to professional athletics. I enjoy this aspect of it. Guys stick around. They mature both physically, mentally, and all of a sudden they become studs that you're never going to forget.
Yeah, and this is important to remember that Michael says Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees quarterback development is gone, burn it out of memory. And not just quarterback development, but like all of the thinking on what we've seen from offensive approach and just how they do things. You're going to have a completely different mind operating things, So everything that we think we know, or everything that we've seen anyway for the last, 13 years, is going to be different now.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that the offense is going to be drastically different, other than you're going to have a more competent quarterback who can stretch the field like we've talked about. But just all those different things, it's all kind of a wait and see, because it's Jared Parker's offense now.
And it's the same terminology.
And I think the head coach will also have more input.
Yeah, the offense is going to look different. It's going to look a lot different, in my personal opinion. They're going to be doing some different stuff offensively, and it is going to be much approved, at least by this guy.
Interesting one from Brent. This is one that I heard floated out there when Buckner was still making his decision. Is there a possibility Tyler Buckner transfers back to Notre Dame? What are the transfer portal rules and regulations? He could absolutely come back.
He could. I mean, is it allowed? Absolutely. I mean, Stetson Bennett did it. He was at Georgia. He left and played and then came back to Georgia. So
yeah. And there was a Gaduli coached a guy at Cincinnati. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but I think he went to like Eastern Michigan or something like that and then he went back again.
Yeah.
So it's exact same deal.
It's possible, highly doubtful. I think honestly he burned some bridges when he left, from what I can gather. I don't think the staff was super happy that he left. He left one quarterback competition to slide into another one, which it's just kind of weird. I don't know that he would be welcome back, if I'm being honest. I would personally, from a football X's and O's standpoint, would love to have him back. I just don't think that is reality, unfortunately.
Yeah. But theoretically he could.
Yeah, because he'll have his degree by then. I don't believe he got it at Notre Dame, but he'll get it from Alabama at least in the next year, and so he could potentially come back.
Yeah. All right, Vince. A lot of good questions. Are you ready for rapid fire?
I wasn't ready. You kind of took me by surprise. Let's go.
Cut you. Surprise left. That's right. Of course, as always, we'll slip in more questions as we go if you want to slip some of your own questions in. This first one, though, we might be talking about it for a while. So the Sporting News Magazine, I know Brian wrote something up about this. Sporting News Magazine ranked every FBS football coach 1 through 133. Marcus Freeman comes in at number 30. So first question, Are you good with the ranking? And I don't know if you've had time.
You sent me a list and I perused it. I
I've
looked
got
through
1
it.
through 36
Right.
in here. Are you good with where Marcus Freeman is? Is there anyone ahead of him who you think he should be ahead of?
I mean, I think you could make a case for pretty much anybody from like 21 on. To be honest with you, maybe a couple you could cherry pick a couple from here or there that are even above that.
PJ Fleck, by the way, number
Yeah.
21.
See that's why I started there. To be honest with you,
Kalen DeBoer from Washington at 23. It's like, really? Is he that? What's he done so far?
Right.
Dan Lanning at Oregon at number 25. Again, what have you done? Okay.
Sure. And that's
not to interrupt you, but
no.
Just throwing those out as examples.
You're 100% accurate, and like I would even honestly, and this is selfish. This is selfish, right? I would put him above James Franklin. I'm not a huge James Franklin fan. I mean, what has he done, right?
But he's at least got a track record of winning.
I get it, and that's why I
at a couple schools. So
overall, I'm honestly fine with Freeman being at 30, and here's why: he's got 1 year. He's got 1 year as a head coach.
8-4,
and he was 9-4, right? Whatever it was, right?
Yeah, 9-4 when it was all said and done. You're right.
So, okay, he's 9-4. Stick him at 30. I think he's got a lot to prove this year. I am very confident that he will do that. I think he's a better coach than a lot of the people on this list. But if you're just looking at it on paper, 30. That's fine. That's fine for now. I think he climbs this list aggressively after this year. If they like redid it at the end of the year, I think he climbs this list aggressively. And then I would have an issue because, like, do I like the fact that Brian Kelly's at number 6? No, but he's been to a national championship game. He's been to the 2 Final Fours, right? I mean,
and like, look at who's in front of him and who's behind him. Like in front of him, of course, like Nick Saban is obviously number 1, Kirby Smart number 2. Those are both no brainers. Then you got Dabo, Jim Harbaugh, Ryan Day, Brian Kelly, and then behind him, Lincoln Riley, Luke Fickell, Kyle Whittingham, Josh Heupel. Brian Kelly has to be at number 6.
Well, because
the only question is, should he be ahead of Jim Harbaugh?
Well, and that was going to be my next thing, because Jim Harbaugh has been to what, 2 Final Fours? Does that sound right?
Right, 2 playoffs. Yeah,
2 playoffs, right? And Brian Kelly's been to 2 playoffs plus a national championship. So I would actually put Jim Harbaugh behind Brian Kelly, because he doesn't have that elusive national championship either. Okay. Do I think Marcus Freeman's a better coach than Luke Fickell? Yep, I do. It's the reason he got the job over Luke Fickell when it was open. Okay. But Luke Fickell's been to a Final Four, so he belongs higher on the list. You know what I mean? So, like, I'm okay with it. I don't think he's a better coach. I don't. Now, Marcus Freeman could prove me right, or he could prove me wrong.
But the other part of this is, like, are we just talking coaching acumen? How much does recruiting factor into this?
For sure. And I think that that's actually a really good point, which is why once he puts another stamp on a really good recruiting class and has a good season on the field, that's why I think he rockets up the list here. Look, we all have our issues with Brian Kelly. A lot of it is because, well, there's many reasons, whatever, right? But on paper, he belongs where he's at, if not even a little bit higher. And that, it's like acid coming out of my mouth, but it's accurate. And Marcus Freeman is at 30 for now. That's fine. His trajectory is here for me. Like, he's going up. He's going up.
I've got no problem with Marcus Freeman at number 30 because, as we were just talking about, the guy has only had 1 season. So the resume is very short, and he went 9-4 in that first season. And it's not that he lost. He actually lost Ohio State and USC, but beat Clemson. Then he had basically 2 unforgivable losses.
Absolutely.
That you can't lose. So there's the verdict's still out there. But again, like, if we're weighing in recruiting, then maybe that is why he's like bumps him up, even like it forgives a little bit of that, because like right behind him is Dave Clawson at Wake Forest, who like, if I go Dave Clawson or PJ Fleck, I'd put Dave Clawson ahead of PJ Fleck. When you look at what Clawson's done at Wake Forest, a completely non-traditional football school, and what he's been able to do there, I've got to put him higher than that. Mike Norvell at number 24, I feel like is a little bit high because he's had one good season at Florida State. I realize he was
Florida State's
successful
the
before.
pick this year. You know what I mean?
But
Like
that's the
part
fashionable
of it.
pick. That's
Yeah,
exactly
absolutely.
right. That's
And
exactly right.
You know who I would have higher on this list? Shane Beamer. He's in there at 32. I actually think he's a pretty darn good coach.
Yeah.
I
but
think
again,
that he's
short resume.
Absolutely. So I'm okay with it because that's where he's at right now. But I think his trajectory is here as well. You know what I mean? So he's a good young coach. He's in the kind of the same conversation as Marcus Freeman, although I think Marcus Freeman has better talent on his roster and has more of a chance at making a statement this year.
Right.
But I would take Shane Beamer over a lot of the coaches that are ahead of both him and Freeman.
Seeing like Matt D says you can't make Freeman a top 10 head coach with only one season, especially 9-4. Had he gone 12-0, it would be different. And even that, like 12-0 changes things quite a bit. But even say he's 10-2, for example, I think you're only like when you look at, because again, you've got coaches with track record in front of him, like you've got like Pat Narduzzi at number 17 and Mark Stoops at number 16. Those are a couple guys, like, as we look at overrated, underrated, and like I think the most overrated in this group, and the only reason he's as high as he is at number 12 is Mac Brown. I realize the guy won a national championship, but how many seasons did he go at Texas completely underachieving before he finally won that national championship in 2005? And then it completely backslid. Like the last 4 or 5 years he was at Texas. They bring him out of retirement at North Carolina. He's a good recruiter, So again, like when you look at how a guy recruits, how much is this factoring in this list? I don't know. But I think Mac Brown, with actual on-field accomplishments, even since he's been back at North Carolina, like I guess they're not having losing seasons at North Carolina, but he's recruiting and producing NFL caliber quarterbacks, but it's not resulting in even getting to the ACC championship game in a conference that you should at least be able to get to the conference title game.
I will say, from an overrated standpoint, pretty much everything you just said about Mac Brown, I think I could say about Jimbo Fisher. I think he's incredibly overrated on this list. I think Mark Stoops is overrated on this list. To be honest, too. I've already said James Franklin. I think he's incredibly overrated as well. He's a good recruiter, but and there's a lot of hype around. This is going to be a big year for him, to be honest with you, because there's a lot of hype around Penn State and what they're going to be able to do. Can he live up to the hype? That's going to be the big question. I don't think he's a very good game day coach. I think he's a really good recruiter. I don't think he's a very good coach. This year is going to do a lot for me to kind of cement my opinion of James Franklin. So those would be my overrateds. Like off the top, my PJ Fleck, obviously, I think is way overrated. And then my underrated would be Shane Beamer. I think he belongs maybe a little bit higher on the list as well.
Yeah. My guy Lance Leopold at Kansas comes in at number 36. I'd bump him up a little. I can't bump him up too far. He's only been there 1 year, but I mean, no, I guess 2 years now at this point. But really strong Division III record before he went there, and getting Kansas out of the toilet bowl and at least making them respectable last year was quite an accomplishment in year 2. Schedule's going to be a little bit tougher this year, but at least there's something to look forward to for Kansas football. Now, DT says these lists don't mean much to me. And I'm not going to say I completely disagree with that. I don't, but it's May 31st.
Exactly.
And the reason people put out lists like this is to get us talking about them. It's like it's something to talk about at the end of May as we get set for the dog days coming up here in June and July.
Yep. Somebody asked where Kansas State's coach was. He's number 18.
Yeah.
Kansas State's coach, number 18.
Kleeman. Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that's probably a good spot for him. Again, like you get into those kind of, from 15 to 25, they're largely interchangeable. Like Dave Doran North Carolina State at number 22, for example.
Yeah,
But
that's a little high, probably. Everybody's saying that's a trap game for Notre Dame,
yeah,
and all these different things. It's their first true road game of the year. Obviously, Ireland is on the road. I get it, but this is their true road game to another campus. I just don't think it's going to be that close, Sean. I just feel like they're not going to be able to compete with Notre Dame. Maybe I'm wrong, and we'll see.
I don't think so either.
I just don't think it's going to be.
Noon kickoff, we just found out today. Yep.
Did we really? A nooner?
Yep. Noon at North Carolina State. I thought for sure it'd be in prime time, but that's an interesting one.
Interesting. Noon on ESPN, I take it?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. Dave Doran, by the way, the NC State coach, a guy who wanted to go to Kansas and they wouldn't hire him a few years back. And this was before they even hired Leopold there. But yeah, I think he kind of is where he is because it's like NC State, you're at a non-traditional play,
right.
He's done well, but I agree with what you're saying. Like we had a question last week about what Stuart Mandel, like he made the bold prediction about, he said that Brennan Armstrong's going to light up Notre Dame basically.
Okay.
And I don't see it. I don't see it.
That's great. Go ahead.
Yeah. Fill in the blank, Vince. Notre Dame defensive lineman Riley Mills is blank.
An enigma wrapped in a question mark. Like he is. We all thought that he was going to have this breakout season last year, and it never really materialized. I'm not saying he played poorly, but it never really materialized, right?
We expected him to be a difference maker last
Absolutely.
year. And I don't think
wasn't.
you could call him that. Yeah.
No, he was not a difference maker, and it was unfortunate. I think he has to be this year. Like this is his year where he's going to have to step up and be that difference maker. Either they're going to play him on the inside, they're going to play him from the large end spot, wherever he happens to be. He's going to have to be a difference maker for this front seven to be the front seven that they need to be for Notre Dame to be a 10, 11, 12 win team, right? He's going to have to be. He's got to step up his game big time. In my opinion.
Yeah. I agree. And it's funny, you started off with something along the line. You said an enigma wrapped in, something, and enigmatic is the first thing that comes to mind because of everything that you just talked about. Like 16 tackles 2 years ago, he only improved that by 8. Now, granted, there was the position switch where, he playing more inside than outside,
Sure.
How much different, but like you look at this guy, he's just chiseled. He's like a Greek freaking Adonis, and like you just expect more of him. And he's got to be a difference maker this year with where this defensive line is, with where he is in his career. The time is now for Riley Mills. And, you talk about expectations and all that stuff. I think that there are great expectations for him this year, and he's got to come through if the defense is going to step up to the next level this season.
Absolutely. Completely agree with you. And if he can step up, this front seven is going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. And I think he could be, he has the ability to be that leader of that group too. You know what I mean? And so that's what I'm hoping to see from Riley Mills. That we need to see it. It was a disappointment last year for sure.
DT says he's so hot. Sean has a poster in his bedroom. I have no posters in this bedroom.
It's right off to the side. It's like right here.
As far as you can see.
Yeah.
Johnny asks, when do summer workouts start? I believe they're the middle of June, correct?
I believe they report this coming weekend.
Oh, is it this quickly already?
That's what Brian said yesterday on our show. So yeah, I believe they're going to report. So they're going to move in, and there's, they're not going to like start workouts that day. So my guess would be sometime next week.
Johnny also said, what do we think about Coach Freeman throwing out the first pitch at the White Sox game? Did you see that today?
I did. I was a big Marcus Freeman fan until today. Very disappointing that is what he chose to do. He didn't go to the north side first, went to the south side. Very disappointing. And if he wasn't invited to the north side, then I have an even bigger problem with my beloved Cubbies and the front office.
You would think that at some point the Cubs will get him over there to, like with all the people that they roll in, like Brett Bielema.
Right.
Did you hear him singing I think it was last night. It was bad. It was
I'm sure.
Man, that guy was off key singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," but
just brutal that he went to the
Mike
south
Bray
side.
used to go all the time. You'd think that they'd get Marcus Freeman over there.
I gotta think that they reached out, but if they reached out already and he chose to go to the south side first, there's no excuse for that.
He had the Sox jersey on in the picture.
I know he did,
but it looked like the whole staff went over. It looked like they loaded up a bus and went over there.
Well, hopefully they had a defensive tackle there with them from the Chicagoland area. Maybe he's a White Sox fan. I don't know.
Who are you talking about?
The recruit, the defensive tackle that they're trying to get out of Chicago.
Okay. I was like,
maybe he's a White Sox fan. Look, if that was the case, I'd throw on a White Sox jersey too. If that means that he's going to commit, but that would pretty much be the only way.
Yeah. So you threw me with that one there for a second. All right, so we've been talking here and there, coaches, teams, titles, all that kind of stuff. What's a team, Vince, that has not yet made the college football playoff that you think has the best chance to make it this year?
This is tough, and I will fully admit I did not have a chance to research this one, but I don't believe USC has been in the title in the Final Four. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, so they would be up there for sure.
Okay,
because Washington's been in there, believe it or not.
They have. Washington and Oregon have both been there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that you can't.
So
is
is Florida State. Like in the early days, like the first couple years, because like Florida State was the first one that at least came to mind. Again, I still think that they're overrated, but Florida State, the year after they won their championship, I think that was the first year of the playoff. And then I think Oregon was in that one. Yeah, Oregon was in that one. And then Washington, I believe, was the next year.
Okay.
They were in there.
Gotcha.
So all three of those have made it. This was tough.
This is really tough because a lot of the teams that we think can win a national championship have already been in there.
Right. See, and like here's, again, like USC is a good team. I'm not trying to take anything away from USC, but and as of right now, they've got the 5th best odds to win the national championship in Vegas. But they also here's what their last 6 weeks look like. Notre Dame, then Utah, back to back. Then they've got Cal, so a little bit of a breather in there. But then they go Washington, Oregon, UCLA to close the season.
That's tough.
I just don't think that USC is good enough to run that gamut and not lose more than at least a couple games out of there.
Sure.
So that's why it's, and then, like Utah, same deal. They've got to play all those same teams. Like you look at Penn State, they've got to play obviously Ohio State and Michigan. So it's tough for me to throw Penn State in there.
Sure.
Tennessee has to play Alabama and Georgia. It's tough to find. So like, I'm going to go real dark horse with my pick. And I understand you taking USC. Maybe USC is that good and they end up, running that Pac-12 gambit. But I think that all those teams are close enough. And USC didn't have to play most of those teams last year, which is part of why they ended up with the record that they had. I'm good. I almost went with Texas, but they're actually playing Alabama again this year. So I'm not going to go with Texas. I'll go Big 12 and we were talking about Chris Kleeman a minute ago, the Kansas State head coach.
Going with the Wildcats.
True dark horse. I mean, TCU came out of nowhere last year. So I think that the Big 12, even adding the new teams this year, I think a Big 12 team maybe has the best chance to do something.
Is this the year that they're adding in the Big 12? So Cincinnati and they're all in there.
BYU, Central Florida, Houston. Yep.
Interesting. So that'll be interesting to see how those teams fare in the Big 12. Mm-hmm. Another team, and we talked about them again. I don't think that they're actually going to do it, but Penn State has an opportunity, right? I mean, supposedly they have this explosive offense and they're going to score a bunch of points and all these, but I'm sorry, I just don't see that being the case. So I'll stick with USC. They have a really good quarterback. Supposedly the defense is better. I'll still stick with them. But you're right. They have a gauntlet of a schedule, and I think they're going to beat each other up over there in the Pac-12.
DT, I'll make you feel better because until I remembered, DT says, Sean always hates on my Huskies. Before I realized that Washington has already been in the playoff, they would actually be the team that I would have picked. Like but they've already been there before. They would have. That was the team that I was leaning toward. But again, that whole bunch in the Pac-12, I just think it's going to be really competitive between those teams this year. But that's who I would have picked over USC if Washington hadn't already been there. If that makes you feel better.
Love it if Michael Penix beat up on Caleb Williams. I would really enjoy that game. I would really, really enjoy that.
Yeah, me too, for sure. So with Texas and Oklahoma set to join the SEC next season, there's all this talk about what are they going to do with their schedule? What's the conference schedule in the SEC going to look like? So the two options are stick with 8 conference games a year, but you have just one fixed opponent. So you've got one rivalry game that you're guaranteed every year instead of the current 2. Or you go to 9 conference games, you've got 3 fixed opponents that you play every year. So what do you think?
I like parity. I like difference. I like change. And so, well, no, I don't. I don't like change, but I like change for other people. And yes. I would like to see the SEC playing different opponents. And so I would go with the 8-game, 1 guaranteed. You get one rival. You get one in-conference rival, and that's it. And everybody else can rotate around. So that's what I would choose because I want to see more big-time matchups in the SEC. I don't need to see everybody playing Vanderbilt and, et cetera, et cetera. I want to see more big-time matchups, and I think we'll get that if they have one, permanent opponent.
I think that's what they're going to end up doing. And I think it's probably going to come, the schools have to vote on this. They only need 8 votes to get a majority, even with the expansion that they're going to have. But I think it's going to come down to they're in the SEC, and coaches would rather play one less conference game per year because of the fact that's one, less quality opponent you're probably going to have to play. And
well, that's the other problem. Are they going to play 4 crappy non-conference teams?
Right. And remember, Nick Saban was complaining a while back, whoa, we've got to play Auburn and we're going to have to play LSU and, all this different, So I think you're better off just going with the 8, have one fixed opponent. And, that way you're also, if you go to 8, you're going to rotate through the rest of the conference. Because I think I saw Texas A&M still hasn't been to Georgia in all the time that they've been in the SEC so far. They played Georgia once. If you're in the conference with all these other schools, you need to play them more often.
I agree completely. Don't be afraid to play teams that are in your conference. Right. That's why I want more, different opponents and things like that, because I think we'll see more of that.
Yeah. Fill in the blank. We already knew that NBC was going to televise the Penn State West Virginia game on September 2nd as their first primetime game. It's blank that their Big Ten game the following week, September 9th, in primetime, Maryland versus Charlotte.
You've got to be kidding me that that's the best game that they could come up with during that weekend. I don't know what the Big Ten slate is that weekend, but you're telling me that Maryland and Charlotte is the best you could come up with? That's pathetic.
I don't know, and the networks draft these games,
sure,
because Fox and NBC are both televising Big Ten games this season, for example. So they do a draft, but there are a lot more than just, so Fox on that same day is going to have Nebraska versus Colorado, which, by the way, is going to be Colorado's second consecutive big noon kickoff game to start off the season, because they're going to start the season with TCU Colorado. So you're going to get prime at noon, 2 straight games. But here are some of the other Big Ten games going on that day. You got Iowa versus Iowa State. I mean,
that already I'm on board with that. It's a rivalry game. You put that in prime time. Let's go.
You've got Wisconsin, Washington State, Illinois versus Kansas. Now, Purdue also plays Virginia Tech. It's already been assigned to ESPN2. So I don't know how it works with these, because those are all the Big Ten team is on the road for those 3 games: Iowa, Wisconsin, and Illinois. So I don't know how it works with, Fox again is the other partner. So does FS1 get to pick first? I don't know, but I completely agree. there are definitely better matchups that are like,
Yeah.
I would love to see Illinois, Kansas on NBC that night as opposed to Maryland, Charlotte. It's just, I don't get it either.
Yeah, and I'm
I don't think
interested to
anyone does.
see what the other primetime games are that night because, Notre Dame games at noon that day, right?
Right.
And so we're actually going to be free to watch some primetime football. There better be something good on. I'm not tuning in to Maryland, Charlotte. I can promise you that. Like, that's not the game I'm going to be watching. Not even close.
Yeah. That Nebraska Colorado game, I'll be really interested to see what that turns out to be. Like back when I was in college, those were still two like teams that were at the top of the Big 12 back then.
It'll be
a lot has changed since then.
Sure. But it'll be interesting to see if the shine has worn off of the Colorado thing by then. But that's only 2 weeks in, so
exactly. We had a couple other questions that I wanted to get to. DT wanted to know, do we have any summer plans before fall camp begins?
Lots of work. I got summer school. I've got Notre Dame summer camps. I've got a vacation squirreled away in there somewhere. And I'm trying to steal my wife away for a getaway for our anniversary in early August. But we'll see if the finances can hold serve on that one. But It's not easy getting away from 5 kids, Sean Steyer. So we'll see how that goes.
Very true. Yep. I've got a vacation planned for later in July as well. So looking forward to that. And other than that, there's like a concert or two.
Oh, nice.
That we plan on hitting as well. So all coming up near future. Ted Lasso wrapped up last night, Vince. Now, the last we talked about this, no spoilers for the chat, by the way.
Yeah, none.
I'm a good 4 or 5 episodes behind.
Oh, okay.
Where are you right now?
I'm at 0 because I was waiting for the final one to come out, and then I'm going to renew my subscription so I can just binge them all.
Okay.
So that was kind of my plan. So far? No, because what I did, you know me, right? So I had Apple Plus, and then I dropped it to pick up Paramount Plus.
Okay,
to watch some of the things I wanted to see there. So it's like kind of every other. So once I get through what I'm doing on Paramount Plus, then I'm going to drop that and go into Apple Plus, and then
do the Lasso binge. Okay.
Yep.
I'm having a hard time with this last season.
I was going to ask you about that, like your feelings.
I'm not going to give away. I'm not going to give away plot, but
right.
like they're spending a lot more time with like the like Rebecca, for example, and you remember Nate, the coach that went out like.
We know he went to coach another team. Like that was at the end of the last season. So
right, he's got a storyline, and then the girlfriend, I can't think of her name off the top of my head.
The little squirrely one.
Yeah, that she's like the PR person, and she's dated a couple of the players. She's got a lot of story. There's just like doesn't have to be on the pitch. I'll say pitch because it's soccer, but it doesn't have to be on the pitch, but like spend more time with the team. And Ted Lasso, the show's called Ted Lasso, and so it's been hard for me to kind of stick with it. I've had a hard time really like feeling like, oh, I've got to watch Ted Lasso right now. There was 1 or 2 episodes I really struggled to get through, so I'm hoping
it's not exactly a ringing endorsement to jump back in here.
This last episode that I just watched was a little bit better because it got a little bit more into the team again.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that continues. But
all right,
I don't know.
I'm not overly enthusiastic at the moment. So
I know. But in the meantime, we've been doing a Friday Night Lights rewatch. When's the last time you watched Friday Night Lights?
I have watched Friday Night Lights through twice, maybe 3 times.
Have you?
And I am currently in the 3rd season, I want to say, of Friday Night Lights.
We're on, I think, episode 13 or 14 of season 1.
Okay.
Started
I'm right ago. Where J.D. McCoy is there, and the quarterback coach is there, and he's starting to infiltrate, into the team. Like, that's the season I'm in. I don't even know what number season that is. But like when I'm bored, I'll be like, you know what? I'm throwing on another episode, like just to jump right back in because I friggin' love that series. Love it.
It's really good, and like there's some stuff like that was 2006 when that series started.
Wow.
And it's like, that was network TV, is, like NBC. And I'd forgotten,
Yes.
like there was some stuff going on in there that I don't think that they would be showing on network TV today.
There
But
are, yeah,
go
you're
ahead.
right. And I was going to say, there's only a few, like, how many series can you count that you have watched more than once from start to finish?
Lost,
Okay.
Breaking Bad,
Okay.
The Shield. That was one of my favorite shows. Got the DVD set on Lost and The Shield, and Better Call Saul. I think those are
Wow.
probably
Okay.
it. And they're like linear, storyline type shows. So like you've got to, just
Absolutely.
you've got to watch one episode to watch the next. Kind of like Friday Night Lights.
Yeah,
Really,
absolutely.
the
You got to know
storyline
what's going
is
on.
continuous. Yeah, I had forgotten a couple of different things. One, I'd forgotten about like how long, like Jason Street, like that storyline went through the first season. Did he go into the second season, or was he
Oh,
done by
he
the end
was
of the
in
first
like the
season?
first few seasons.
Was he?
Oh
I
yeah.
was thinking he was. I was thinking he was gone. Like I didn't remember him being
Oh yeah. He
that
ends up
big a
getting a
part of the
girl
storyline.
pregnant and like, it's a whole
Man,
thing.
definitely didn't remember that. And I had also forgotten, like how Coach Taylor is a little bit more hard nosed than I remember him. Like I remembered him being kind of, like not just flat out nice guy, but just a little bit more Texas, kind of, like I didn't remember him being such a hard ass, I guess.
He had to have the shield up, man. Like he was
Yeah.
taking it from all angles, like, yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Coach Taylor. Big fan of Coach Taylor. No doubt about that.
Tommy Guns, have I ever watched Blue Mountain State? I don't even think I've heard of Blue Mountain State. Where can I find Blue Mountain State? What's it about?
It's a series about a fake college football team.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure it's pretty raunchy, but I could be wrong on that. Not on like raunchy comedy. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like that kind of a thing. I think I've never watched it either. I believe it's on something that I don't get, but I'm not 100% sure. I got to be careful watching that kind of stuff around my house. A lot of young eyes, But
yes.
I've rewatched only a few series, to be honest with you. West Wing.
I never watched that the first time. I never watched that one either.
And Friday Night Lights. Those are the only three I can remember that I've watched.
Wow.
All the way. Actually, I watched it. I don't know why. Don't know why. Heartland. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's like
I've heard of it, but I've never seen it.
They live on like a ranch,
Okay.
that kind of. I don't know why, but I watched that whole thing too.
We actually just did an Entourage rewatch. Now that I think about it,
Oh, okay.
We just did that. So that ended, and my wife's like, "Well, what can we watch next?" And I was like, "Netflix has Friday Night Lights."
Yeah, baby.
And that was one that she watched. We watched the whole thing the first time together.
Did you really?
She loves it. Yeah.
That was
so.
Yeah, I watched it. Like that was like, well, you said 2006, so it was like early on in my marriage. Like it went from NBC, and then remember it went off of NBC
Audience
and it went
channel.
to DirecTV.
Right.
I changed my carrier to DirecTV
just so you could have it
because of that. Just because of that. Yeah. Scary but true. That's how somebody in their mid-20s operates.
You were really and that was obviously before all the streamers and stuff took off. So
correct.
And that's the cool part about it is like it's got a lot of episodes because of the fact that it was on network TV for a couple of years before it got moved over.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Well, we'll wrap it up with that tonight. Little Friday Night Lights memories and see what happens with Ted Lasso, I guess. Appreciate you coming on board tonight. Smash the like button and, of course, subscribe, rate, review. Leave us a comment on the YouTube platforms, and we will talk to you tomorrow when we do it again on IB Nation Sports Talk.